She's stuck in your head, isn't she? In the days after your sister passed, you kept wondering what was going through her mind. And you still beat yourself up, wondering what else you could have done. That's called grief, Chris, I know. But this practice, it could help you through this, and much more. It could give you a purpose.
Why me?
I'm told you have the gift of lucid dreaming. That mind of yours, it could be the answer to all my years of this study.
Okay. What do you need me to do?
So we shot the film in April 2021. It was basically a 2-weekend shoot, 5 days of production. We didn't have the privilege of editing every single day, so actually me and my editor, put this thing together as best as possible. Went through multiple cuts of the film. I probably drove Nick insane, as every director should to an editor, I think. It's usually what happens. Once we finished the film, I wanted to host a private screening for all the cast and crew, all the people who actually helped in the fundraiser and donated to my vision, to myself. I basically rented out a theater on a Saturday night, invited as many people as I could. I believe we had over 90 people sitting in the theater for the first time showing it to everybody. And I remember physically shaking because that was the first time I really had anybody really viewing the film. And I'm sure as other filmmakers out there can immensely relate to it, because I was basically living with this film for over a year, like I mentioned. Very few eyes on it, occasional people, test screenings here and there, sitting down, picking the brains of one another. But once you finally, let go of your baby and put it out into the public, it's an experience that I will absolutely remember for the rest of my life, even though it was just a short film, but in my heart, it was an intense, passionate project that I really want to accomplish. In 2022, I went on my film festival circuit, won 6 awards, 5 for Best Short Film, and 1 for my lead, Charlie McElveen, for Best Actor. And just the idea of leading a team of, 20 to 30 people, even for 5 or 6 days, it's a pretty intense and somewhat overwhelming, task to take on, especially as a young filmmaker as myself. Honestly, in that time, I didn't really have the ability to really self-reflect on it and notice wow, I'm really doing this. They're really relying on me. And, in retrospect of it, now that it's been over 2 years since the actual production, yeah, I can't really put in the words how grateful I am to the cast, to the crew, to everybody who relied on me to bring them to the ultimate goal of creating the project and staying on schedule, climbing over all the obstacles that come within filmmaking. And I believe I took them to what the ultimate goal was, and that was to make a successful film. Looking back at it now, that idea, that concept that did latch onto my mind, was this idea of, what if you're able to communicate with your past self? What would you tell them from your experiences that you've had? And I feel like that's kind of the paradox of life, being able to ingest all of these life lessons and kind of embed it into our self-being and integrity. It's definitely a bittersweet concept at the end of the day, because even if we did have the fun ability to communicate with another version of ourselves, we do come back and we would have to live with our self-faults. We definitely have this instinctual quality to ourselves to where we're urged to pass on our life lessons from our failures to whether it's our loved ones or people we really care about. Deep into the core of this mind adventure story I wanted to create, I also wanted to keep the human qualities to it. So in that sense, I wanted to definitely add this idea of mental health and kind of create a therapeutic sense of serenity at the end of this film. When I was writing this film, it was during COVID in 2020, and I think our entire world, everybody was kind of miswired inside their mind. There was definitely a sense of fear and uncertainty in that time, and I think subconsciously that's what ultimately bled into the writing process of this project. The motivation to actually keep pushing on to these next drafts of writing it, I just kept thinking to myself, like, this is the time to tell this story. My intentions for this film were to create a fun, thrilling piece of work, but also keep the complexity and integrity, present relatable themes, but also have this contemporary approach to it. I actually wrote a couple of drafts of the film about 2 years before actual production, basically right out of film school, and I felt I wasn't completely ready yet, and I went on and actually wrote a couple other projects. I think the best thing for me was I distanced myself from that idea that I loved and just put it on the shelf, let it marinate, let me have some time from it. I went on and practiced another exercise, and I actually went and wrote my first feature script. Wrote a couple other projects. So I had some pretty big writing projects that I always wanted to take on, and I was like, this is finally the opportunity to go and do that. So I went and did that. I solely just focused on writing. In my mind, the confidence was already building, and I already had repetition as a writer. I ended up going back and picking up The Morning Breeze, and it's way different from the first few drafts that I wrote, but those same core principles are in there currently in the final product. So I went in and basically started from scratch with The Morning Breeze. Wrote about 4 to 5 drafts, constantly having people read it. As a writer, as much feedback as possible is what you are thirsty for. And, I luckily had a handful of people that I was able to rely on, and I felt it was ready to take on the next stage.
Okay. Well, this is very informative.
I was standing right in front of her, Dr. Case. I could almost touch her, but I couldn't stop her. I couldn't help her.
She'd be happy that you were doing this, though. Chris, time will become your acquaintance. And the more you know how to utilize it, the more you'll realize how valuable it is.
So as I was formulating the story structure, basically 2 timelines happening at once, being able to intertwine them together and thinking about how it's actually going to edit together. So the story typically always comes first for me. And obviously once you have the story, then you have the characters. They kind of organically formed themselves, and especially after the first few drafts is the time when I really do a lot of character work, mainly in their dialogue, how they converse with one another, how they move within a scene, how they enter or exit a scene, even the space that they live in. That's when you kind of create the physicality and even kind of the cadence of their dialogue with one another. Your characters are always an extension of yourself in some capacity. Most of the time it's extremely exaggerated for dramatic effect or to serve the genre of the story, but deep down they're still human and they still need human qualities, and you have to get into the mind of how they think, and even more importantly how they react to certain situations in your film. The most obvious is trying to write fluent dialogue. For me, a lot of the dialogue work comes in 3rd or 4th draft, once you kind of have the bones of the story. And in that time, in those first couple drafts, you've already done more of that character work. Now you really get a sense of how they'll converse with themselves or with others to keep your dialogue as natural as possible. There's definitely this difference between literature and real life conversation. For me, I really became aware to this idea in rehearsals when I'm basically working with these actors, and even while we're shooting, there's certain things that we'll have to cut out or rework. Even all the work that I put in off paper, all that character side work that I was able to advance and influence my drafts, but They ultimately came very helpful in the directing of it when we actually came to pre-production and casting. It was fun to hand over a lot of the character work that I did as the writer and pass it along to the actors. I really wanted to create something that, again, I felt really passionate about, but more so showed off my work as a writer and showed off all the work that I put in prior to it. I don't think I would have the same film that I have right now because just the repetition that I was able to gain. Whenever I'm writing something, music is always in my back pocket to help motivate me. I definitely go out and try to listen and explore different musical themes. My composer that we have, I actually came across some of his work in that time before I even met him or knew him, before I ever reached out to him. I was listening to his work that actually ended up being in our film, which was really cool. So just the power that music has on your writing process is something I'll always have to piggyback on.
Time is all you have right now.
Time's not gonna bring my sister back, is it?
It's been 6 months. This is the time for you to look back on your past and reconcile with it.
How? How? She's gone. She doesn't exist anymore. How am I supposed to reconcile with that? God. Every day I think, what did I miss? What did I not see, not say? I can't eat, I can't sleep. I can't get what happened to her out of my head. I'm starting to feel like my life has no purpose.
I may be able to help you with that.
Shrinking down this big of a project into just a short was a little bit daunting, but I think we ultimately pulled it off. And now even when I do approach my next big projects, I have that confidence in me to know that I did achieve something like this. So whether it's another short or another feature, you know, I'm just constantly trying to build that fire in me and continue to fuel it. I can go and look back on the trajectory of all of my films that I've done and know that I can clearly see the leap from each film and basically reassure myself that I did take on those challenges and I did grow and I did improve, and it's only gonna get better project after project after project. So that's even another reason why I'm creating videos like this, because I know that every time I'm creating, I'm only just building myself up as a creator.